Hello, welcome to Unical Academy's CISSP Simple Training Series. In this video session, we will be studying Chapter 2 from Official Guide, Personnel, Security and Risk Management Concepts. The topics that are covered briefly are these: workforce security, risk management concepts, the social engineering where the major scams happen, the basics of what we mean by awareness, training and education. People and the security. Humans are the weakest elements as well as the strength for any security for any organization. The first step where enough precautions need to be taken is step 1 during onboarding. Onboarding, before inducting any individual, be clear on the job description and the responsibilities for that particular job. Applicable corresponding screen, background check, any sort of validation of the qualification, previous experience, integrity, criminal records verification, all those need to be done. After that, applicable NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, non-competition clauses, any agreements that potentially may damage the organization's security and credibility in case if not signed should be taken care. After that, an individual must be inducted only after signing all the relevant documents based on the specific job description for which he or she works. During course of work, during on job, regularly an assigned manager must manage the work, review the job description, assigned activities, as well as the responsibilities that are being performed, and revise any relevant security privileges and access controls as and when applicable. During the termination, the step 3, when a person resigns or when a person gets terminated, enough precautions must be taken, disabling all access controls, collecting the badges and all gadgets of the organization, maybe laptop, maybe whatever applicable, based on the situation, escorting that individual in case of forceful termination, that should be taken care. All these are applicable for full-time employees of an organization. In case of any contractors, consultants, or the vendor personnel work for an organization, the specific service level agreements, the expectations must be very clear, documented, only based on the documented SLAs, terms and conditions. An individual must be taken into contracting role for any organization. Any outsider working has its own risk and potential consequences that every organization should note down and should plan accordingly. Be clear on the risk terminology. CISSP very clearly would be assessing this. Asset may be a system, a person, or the processes that contribute for business. Those are called assets. Every asset needs to be evaluated. What is this asset value from business perspective? There are ways to calculate the assets. What are the underlying threats, the potential to attack in case if something goes wrong must be clearly understood. Threat is any potential occurrence that may lead to an undesirable outcome. Any undesirable outcome potentially it may be leading is called threat. A person or an agent, a system that is causing a threat is called threat agent. occurrence of vulnerability and exploit. Any occurrence of that particular vulnerability is called threat event. A path, the direction, maybe an IP address through which that threat is actually occurring, that is called path vector. The direction of that is path vector, whether from specific country or a geography or an IP address, that is a threat vector. Vulnerability, weakness in an asset or absence of a control. Either it is a weakness or an absence of safeguard or control is called vulnerability. What is exposure? That is susceptible to asset, to a specific asset, or an asset that is susceptible to a particular loss is called exposure. Risk, the possibility of a threat will exploit a vulnerability or to cause harm. The possibility of exploitation of a vulnerability is risk. Safeguards, these are the controls that remove or reduce the potential vulnerability. Attack can be intentional or unintentional that may exploit the vulnerability and expose a specific asset or set of assets. The last term, breach, a successful bypass of security. Any breach, either to disclose or to access in unauthorized way, is a breach. These are the very critical terms worth noting down. Making your own notes is more meaningful considering the importance of all these for CISSP. Yeah, now we are coming to risk management concepts. How does the risk need to be planned and managed? It starts from asset value. What is an asset value? For those assets, what are the potential threats and vulnerabilities? How do we plan for qualitative and quantitative risk analysis? What is Delphi technique? Let us briefly cover each. An asset must be evaluated. Valuation is essential before going ahead because whether asset worth protecting or not, that is majorly decided by cost benefit analysis. If cost of protecting an asset is more greater than the actual asset value, it is not worth protecting. That is a philosophy, that is an underlying philosophy here. An organization must record an exhaustive list of possible threats. Several federal government agencies follow NIST Special Publication 803 that gives complete list. 803 R1 that has complete list of potential vulnerabilities. Goal of risk assessment is to identify risk and rank them in order of criticality. So subjective assessment is qualitative and mathematical assessment is quantitative. So really giving a dollar amount for any potential risk, breach or vulnerability is quantitative. Only rating with certain perceptions, assumptions, certain observations, qualitative. The last part that worth noting down is Delphi technique. The anonymous way of recording everybody's opinion on the security controls, and the options to follow. This anonymous feedback and response process enables every individual to talk openly. That helps the leadership and organizations to elicit honest and uninfluenced responses from all participants. Now let us go to next slide. Next, majorly to understand what is quantitative risk analysis. Quantitative risk analysis, these four are very critical, but overall there are 6 steps, 6 key elements that are involved as far as quantitative risk analysis is concerned. First, understand asset value. Based on that, what is the exposure factor? What is the possibility or what is percentage of exposure or a certain loss that actually happens? Based on that, you have to calculate SLE, single loss of occurrence. SLE is equal to asset value multiplied by exposure factor. After doing that, assess the ARO, annual rate of occurrence. Is it possible of 2 occurrences per annum or 12 occurrences per annum? That probability of a vulnerability or threat happening, that needs to be calculated or can be fed with based on certain data available. So based on after ARO, recording the ARO either with observations or with the previous data or industry benchmark available, this ARO should be noted down to calculate the ALE, annual loss of expectancy, is equal to SLE multiplied by ARO. Unfortunately, there is no other go except by having understanding all these formulae clearly. At least 1 or 2 questions are expected out of that. Very easy conceptual questions, as long as you are comfortable with these formulae and the basic concepts. What is asset value? What is exposure factor? What is SLE? What is AV? And what is ARO? That without any confusion, if you are clear, you can get ready to solve these problems. Yeah. So risk response. Risk need to be responded. Before going into response, let us understand few basic terms. What is risk appetite? And what is risk tolerance? Risk appetite is the total amount of risk that an organization is willing to shoulder in aggregate across all assets, not one asset. Risk capacity is the level of risk an organization is able to shoulder. So risk capacity may be less, but the appetite to take risk may be more. So capacity is not same as, is not equal to appetite. Please understand this. So appetite may be due to financial constraints or maybe with certain gut feeling. Risk appetite may be generally will always be greater than risk capacity. What is risk tolerance? Risk tolerance is the amount of risk that an organization will accept per individual asset threat pair. Asset, identified assets and corresponding threat. Based on that, organization should understand and should plan what is the risk tolerance ability that organization has. Maybe based on okay to have downtime, or you have sufficient backups to quickly restore, or it is not viable to spend anything beyond certain dollar amount. Based on that, the tolerance is decided. Once these are clear, then each organization can decide what is the approach of clearing. So now let us understand. First is mitigation. Mitigation is nothing but reduction. Maybe the impact of exposure you are minimizing, or potential exposure factor you are reducing by using relevant appropriate controls. That's what is mitigation within the organization. When you say mitigation within the organization, by organization team, it is mitigated. Whereas assignment and transfer, you are transferring the risk handling to an organization. Simple example is buying an insurance is risk assignment. Transferring the work to various different agency, outsourcing the work, maybe due to lack of specialization or considering the potential risk involved. Somebody else is doing the work, or the risk is assigned or transferred to outside agency. That is called risk assignment. This risk deterrent, when you say risk deterrent, the goal is to convince a threat agent not to attack. You are advised not to attack, you are warned not to attack, maybe based on the science, maybe putting a bigger fence, or really having a CCTV camera. So all these are the deterrents. What is avoidance? Risk avoidance is a mechanism by which we are opting for alternate options. Alternate options in the sense, maybe this path is high risk. Do we detour and take another path? Are we so summary is altogether we are avoiding the potential risk path and going for something else. That's what is called risk avoidance. Yeah, this chapter deals with too many definitions. You have to bear with this relatively boring chapter, but this is essential to understand each concept thoroughly. Risk acceptance. Organization management for some reason agreed to accept the risk, most of the times based on cost benefit analysis. It is okay to take the risk without planning anything, is allowed. But the big no is rejection. Assuming that risk never happens or carelessly ignoring the potential risk is big no, as far as CISSP, as far as any security is concerned. All these are meant for risk response. This is the only thing with certain careless we are actually planning to, or organization may be planning to ignore. Okay, so these are the how a risk is responded. Except this is completely ignoring all others, trying to mitigate, minimize, handle, avoid, deter a specific identified risk. Okay, let us go into the terms of what exactly the various types of risks that CISSP covers. Inherent risk is a default risk when a system commissioned or when organization started its business without really having any formal risk management plan. Whereas residual risk, after implementing the controls, the remaining risk is called residual. The residue that remains there even after implementing the controls is residual risk. What is total risk? Total risk is the risk that was existing before implementing the controls. Before implementing the controls is the total risk. So there is another formula here. What is control gap? Control gap is the difference between total risk, means the initial risk before implementing the controls, minus residual risk, the risks after implementing the controls. So total risk minus residual risk is the control gap. What are the total risks? Again, there is another formula for total risks. Total risks equal to threats multiplied by vulnerabilities multiplied by asset value. So threat multiplied by vulnerabilities multiplied by asset value is total risk. Total risk minus residual risk is control gap. Okay, now we are into the next slide, the countermeasures. What are the countermeasures or the controls? This is relatively important section, worth reading thoroughly and listening the audio lessons also by official study guide author Mike Chappell. From nature of countermeasures are the controls, administrative, maybe the policy, maybe the checks and balances that by virtue, by capability, or by virtue of the power of the leadership, certain policies are implemented. Those are the administrative. Logical, these are also called technical. Maybe a firewall, maybe intrusion detection system, anti-malware software, all these are logical. Physical, security cameras, a fence, a serious notice board, all those are the physical. Physically, what you can see, tangible, system wise, by technology wise, by policy and administrative decisions. These are the three types. By applicable types, the controls can be further classified. The controls that prevent a potential attack, such as encryption, access control, anti-malware, these are preventive. The deterrents are to discourage security policy violation, fences, security badges, security guards. These are the deterrent. The compensation to provide various options to other existing controls to enforce security. In case of data loss, how can I compensate? Let me have backup. In case of site outage, how can I restore the services? Let me plan for my business continuity plan and disaster recovery site somewhere. So these are the compensation. Whereas corrective ensures return to normal after an unwanted activity has occurred. So in case if virus impacted a file, how quickly virus can be removed and the file can be restored. That's an example of corrective. Recovery is similar to corrective, but it goes beyond corrective or more advanced than corrective. The way we are talking about the BCPs here. So what is a hot site? What is a warm site? What is a cold site? That's one of the examples of recovery, how quickly we can recover. Directive, as the name suggests, these are majorly setting the direction about how it should be done, security policies, posted notifications, guidelines from a security guard, etc. can be considered directive. So countermeasures, one way of classifying is by nature, another set is where we are applying. So these we should be clear for CISSP exam. Okay. Other aspects of risk management, security control assessment, how frequently, how efficiently, how effectively the implemented security controls are assessed is called SCA. Every security should be measurable and should be monitored so that it can be continuously improved. Otherwise, if quantitatively it cannot be measured, all practical purpose, there is no security. Not only that, it cannot be on individual people. So the overall security management, risk management must be risk journal, risk diary. It should be reported, documented, and should be regularly updated. Summary of this slide: you should have security control assessment, and there should be a way to measure regularly, and everything whatever is being planned, implemented, supported should be reported as agreed and should be documented, and there should be serious efforts for continuous improvement because environment is not fixed, that always changes, the threats actually change. So continual improvement or continuous improvement is essential to ensure the required safety and security. Yeah, there are a couple of risk management frameworks, but as far as CISSP is concerned, NAST risk management framework with six cycle phases, that is really important, and you have to thoroughly understand at least high level concept of RMF. So risk management framework 837 of NIST talks about 6 activities. The first is preparing to handle the risk is the first. Then categorize various identified risks. How do you want to handle? Categorization is the second one. After categorizing for each identified risk, what controls are selected? The select is the third. After that, after selecting, the fourth step is implementing the controls. Fourth is how controls should be implemented. After implementing, authorize the usage of the controls or the new safety criteria. And the last, which is a continuous activity, keep on monitoring to ensure the security is effective and efficient. That is the overall risk management framework. Apart from NASD RMF, there are other 5 that official study guide refers. Worth knowing these names: so threat agent risk assessment, factor analysis for information and risk, active ISACA's risk IT framework, and COSO. So just knowing the names is enough. So major having the grip on RMF is essential, particularly these 6 steps: prepare, categorize, select, implement, authorize, monitor. Yeah. Social engineering is a form of attack that exploits human nature. One human exploits another human's human nature, human behavior. Most of the scams, most of the things happening nowadays are majorly social engineering perspective. So we should be very clear on how it happens. Somebody may use the authority or pretend as such having the authority, or can intimidate during the weakest moments of somebody, or getting the consensus meaningfully by convincing, saying that it is worth doing, you have to opt for this, otherwise you may be losing the opportunity, or CEO is insisting on that. Another option is scarcity. Create an impression as such: you have to book this order in next 2 hours, you have to click this particular hyperlink, otherwise your ID will be disabled. So create scarcity. Or familiarity is particularly more prevailing in social media. Somebody introduces, sends connects from citing I am friend of X, or I am working for organization Y. So that is a familiarity. And the another is winning the trust in wrong way, so that the victim believes, and after that the real scam happens. The last more often happens: create an urgency situation, saying that yeah, you'll be running out of time, something similar to scarcity. Scarcity, you said you have only 2 tickets available. Here you may be saying only 2 minutes available. That's the only difference, but more or less the same. So this is how people may be influenced. That is the human nature. But how exactly the attack happens? What are the various options of attacking? Only to get information. So maybe knowing the phone numbers of specific person. That's what it is. And next is prepending. Maybe adding re as such. It looks like a response to previous mail or some forward or certain prefixes used. Phishing. Phishing is pretty often heard, which is derived from the term phishing. Phishing is a form of social engineering attack that mainly focuses on stealing the credentials or identity information. Spear phishing is targeted, maybe one company's HR group or set of board of directors. So similar to phishing, but you're targeting a specific group. That attacker is targeting a specific group. Whaling, as the name says, whale is a big fish, capture only sea level guys. If the attack is really targeting only sea level or very senior people, that's what is whaling. Smishing. Smishing is sending unwanted or potential risky links through SMS. Using SMS for phishing is smishing. Short message services phishing is called smishing. If it is a voice over IP attack, then it is phishing. So based on telephone voice, it is phishing. Based on the SMS message, it is SMS. All others are digital. Emails are the links by nature. Spam, as you know, any unwanted communication is spam. Shoulder surfing, somebody unintentionally seeing is not called shoulder surfing, but intentionally to steal the data or to capture certain secured information while other person is working on the system. That's what the shoulder surfing. Invoice scams, sending fake invoices to accounts department and expecting them to process it. If that happens, that is invoice scams. Any wrong information that can create chaotic environment that can be utilized to in the right way or in a wrong way for the security breach is hoax. There are few other terms, too many terms. If I read, it may be leading to confusion. So I'm skipping in this discussion, but all these are directly given in official study guide. So worth understanding each clearly, very simple. So majorly where each actually comes into play and how we as certified security professionals should be focusing in preventing all these and how user reacts where the scam happens. This is how it happens. What does it mean? That's what we should be understanding clearly. The last slide. Every employee when gets inducted, basic awareness to understand do's and don'ts need to be captured. That is what you mean by awareness. A prerequisite security training if is conducted for employees, that is awareness. Training, whereas training is little depth, teaching employees to perform their work task and to comply with their security policies, which is essential. Maybe access controls, maybe the different distribution leads, the file usage. That's what the training. Education is way beyond training, more detailed than training. Most of the times it goes beyond the requirement of job. That's what is education. Effectiveness is conducting all these awareness training education is different. Whether each is relevant for that specific organization for that intended purpose, that needs to be thoroughly evaluated. Maybe assessing an individual or overall seeing the risk levels or the exposures that are actually happening, or also gauging the number of attacks, whether those attacks are actually coming down after introducing these trainings. Accordingly, it should be fine-tuned. So thank you for watching this video. So you can visit Unical Academy to download these PowerPoint slides. We are revamping the website. You should be getting more insights by visiting our site regularly, as well as subscribing to Unical Academy channel. Thank you.